Hello, 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 people. Welcome back to the mufcMPB channel. I'm not going to jump the gun too quickly, but this has the potential to be one of my favorite bits of work I've done for mufcMPB. I said last week that we will try our best to join the fans with some of the most connected people in the industry. And today we've done just that. We have got talkSPORT's chief football reporter, Alex Crook. Crookie, thank you so much for joining me. I know how busy you are. I was going to say this time of year, but it's all year round, isn't it, for you? So, firstly, how are you, mate? And how are you finding things after the sort of come down, if you like, from the transfer window?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, nice to join you. I think news never stops. There's always something to write about, always something to talk about on air. And yeah, it was obviously an unusual transfer window compared to previous Januaries. A lot of clubs wary of spending money due to the profit and sustainability rules. So that was a challenge in itself. But obviously, we've had managers come under pressure since that window closed as well. A lot of talk about David Moyes and Roy Hodgson, and obviously the Sir Jim Ratcliffe minority investment rumbles on.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's the perfect place to start. You've reported recently, what, about an hour or two maximum ago, about Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and his minority investment in Manchester United. From the Premier League's perspective, they've given the green light, and Ratcliffe hopes to officially complete the 25% purchase by the end of February. I just wanted to get your personal thoughts on this, Crookie, because if the people watching didn't know, you are a Manchester United fan for all of your sins. What do you think, from combining, of course, all the information that you've been told, and from the fan perspective side as well? What are your personal thoughts on Sir Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS coming into Manchester United?
Well, I've had mixed feelings throughout the takeover process. I wasn't particularly all in terms of the Qataris taking over, and actually, I was one of the first reporters, I think, to come out and suggest that I just didn't see it happening. There were too many red flags for me, and so it transpired. I wonder how genuine the offer that was actually tabled was in the first place from Qatar. So that one's been ruled out. In terms of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I think the fact he's a boyhood Manchester United fan, he's a British businessman, made good. I think that ticks a lot of boxes. Obviously, the big negative for a lot of people is that the Glazers hang around like the bad smell they've been ever since they came into Old Trafford. But I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe is an intelligent guy. He knew that really the only way to eventually gain overall power was with this minority investment. He's taken control of the sporting department of the football club. I think that was much needed. I think some shocking decisions have been made by a very inept board over the last couple of decades that have set Manchester United a long way backwards. So hopefully Sir Jim can get the right people in the right positions and the future can look a whole lot brighter.
Yeah, most certainly. From our perspective, anyway, it'll make our jobs and lives a lot easier if they do go in the right direction. And you mentioned there, obviously, about employing the right people in the right places. And one name I did really want to talk about is Erik ten Hag. Now, of course, I think irrespective of whatever happens this season, when new ownership comes into a football club, we only have to look at the likes of Chelsea and Bournemouth as well as examples, that when new ownership comes in, irrespective of how well or how poor the manager has been doing, they have their own ideas, they have their own identity or their own philosophy in terms of what they want to implement into their new project or business. So, in terms of Erik ten Hag, what's his position like? Is it safe in the summer, or are INEOS likely to want their own manager?
I think that's still very much open to debate. I think I would probably label Ten Hag as being on trial effectively for the rest of the season. Actually, he started that trial period quite well. When you think we're sat here, we're already well into February. United haven't lost a game in the calendar year. Obviously, some performances have been better than others, but I think since the big players started to return to fitness, since he started to get his best team on the pitch, I think we are seeing again what Erik ten Hag can do. I've been a fairly big supporter of Ten Hag in that I think the issues at Manchester United don't rest solely with the manager. I think they go a lot deeper than that. I think the dressing room still needs cleansing. I've mentioned already that the people at boardroom level probably aren't qualified to be making some of the decisions that they've been entrusted with. But I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe will be looking at the overall structure of the football club. We know that he's been at Carrington. He's been at Old Trafford as well. He was at the Spurs game that I was at a few weeks ago. And he'll be looking at Ten Hag. He'll be looking at the decisions that he makes in match. He'll be looking at his relationship with the players. He'll be looking, no doubt, at his training techniques. And he'll be deciding, is Ten Hag the right man to take Manchester United forward? I think if they can get a Champions League place between now and May, And if they can maybe even win the FA Cup, I think Ten Hag would be in a pretty good position to stay. But I take on board everything that you've said, that normally when a football club is taken over, the new owners do want to make their own stamp. They do want to bring their own man in. So I wouldn't say that Ten Hag is on particularly stable ground.
Yeah, it's going to be certainly an interesting one, isn't it? And as you said, in terms of that trial period, I think everyone at the club realistically are going to be in that phase, especially when new ownership comes in. And one big area of employment that has been hitting the headlines is, of course, the sporting director, the new sporting director. What's the latest from your side of things? What have you heard? Who's the favourite for the role at the moment? And in your personal opinion, who would you like to see come through the door in that particular role?
Well, I was told actually within the last couple of hours that United are stepping up their pursuit of Dan Ashworth, sporting director currently at Newcastle. Did a really good job at Brighton before that, and actually did a brilliant job at the FA, almost laying down the blueprint that has given England so much success in recent major tournaments. So I can see the appeal there. He's got a long-standing relationship with Sir Dave Brailsford, who of course is a very trusted lieutenant for Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and I think Ratcliffe admires what Ashworth has done over the course of his career. So I think if they can get him out of Newcastle, I would make him the favourite. Does he want to leave Newcastle? Well, people at St James's Park would probably say no, but I've heard potentially he could be looking for a new challenge. So certainly that's one to keep an eye on. Paul Mitchell, as we mentioned as well, did a good job at Southampton as their transfer guru, went to Tottenham. He's had experience in Europe as well with the likes of Monaco, and he's a Manchester boy. So that, I would imagine, would be a job that would appeal to him a lot. There's been talk of Dougie Freedman, although I think that's largely down to his relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson. I'm not sure I would necessarily be on board with that appointment, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were more than two appointments. I could see a scenario whereby maybe Ashworth comes in as overall sporting director, and then somebody like Paul Mitchell or Dougie Freedman comes in as head of recruitment.
Yeah, it's going to be one of them situations again where it's going to be so many eyes, especially from the Manchester United fans' perspective, because ultimately, these are the individuals that are going to be put in charge to revamp the squad and to get it really to where Manchester United fans want, which is a likable squad first and foremost, and also a successful one as well. And I think, obviously, like I said, the transfers, that kind of stuff, is always going to be on the minds of Manchester United fans. And one name that, of course, has hit the headlines for various reasons over the last couple of years is Mason Greenwood. Now, we don't, of course, need to go into why he's been hitting the headlines. I think it's public knowledge and then some in terms of why he's not at Manchester United currently. But on his current loan in La Liga, he's doing very well. He's scoring goals. He's being quite influential for Getafe out there. So, of course, a section of the Manchester United fans are starting to think about his return, but I'm not quite sure how this is going to play out because, of course, as we say, it's going to be coming in with new ownership with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and I question whether or not really does he want such a big headline in potentially the negative way by bringing Greenwood back, despite his on-the-pitch ability. So if Greenwood was to be sold in the summer, which clubs would potentially be in for him, and how much would United ask for him? And is there even a chance that he could stay at Manchester United?
I think it's very unlikely we see him play in the Premier League anytime in the near future, let alone pull on a Manchester United shirt again. We know the furore when they were potentially planning for his return earlier on in the season. And I don't think that furore would go away. And as you've alluded to there, I don't think Sir Jim Ratcliffe would necessarily want that so early on his watch. And I think other Premier League clubs would be reluctant due to the possible public backlash as well. I think it's much more likely that he stays in Europe. Obviously, he's doing well in La Liga. I know for a fact that big clubs, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, to name two, have been watching him in person for Getafe. So I think it's every likelihood that one of those clubs makes an offer to Manchester United. He's still under contract at Old Trafford. But again, I think from a PR perspective, maybe they want to be seen not to be profiteering too much on what's been a very unsavoury situation. So the transfer fee for me would be guessing games at this moment in time. But the messages that I'm getting out of United are that they still don't plan for Greenwood to play for them again, and that their ideal scenario, I think, is that one of those big clubs do come in and put their money on the table, and then he becomes somebody else's problem.
Yeah, exactly that. And Manchester United have already got enough problems as it is. I don't think they're going to be welcoming too many more coming back into the club anyway. And one name that has, of course, been thrown around in the last few weeks is Michael Olise of Crystal Palace. Now, this young man is absolutely brilliant. He's very exciting, and in many ways, he almost fits that bill, doesn't he, of that traditional Manchester United player, almost the arrogance, but in a very cool, personified way. And again, this is something that excites Manchester United fans, but as we all know, it's not going to come at a reasonable price when it comes to Manchester United. The old Manchester United tax comes to mind. But how likely, firstly, is he to leave Crystal Palace? And also, with several clubs interested, how likely is it to be Man United his next destination?
Well, I think United will be working on that deal actively behind the scenes because it's so important when you've got a player like Elise, who several top clubs in England are looking at. We know that Man City have shown an interest in him, so too of Chelsea, and obviously now Manchester United's interest has been strongly stood up. So I think they're going to want to try and get that deal done early if they possibly can. I think it'd be a real statement signing for Sir Jim Ratcliffe, a sign of a change of direction, because often in recent transfer windows, when they've brought in the headline making signings, they've paid probably over the odds for players whose best days are behind them. Certainly that isn't the case for Michael Olise. I think his best days are very much ahead of him. It changes the whole profile of Manchester United's recruitment. I think that's what Ratcliffe wants to do, and I think this would be a very positive step forward. So I think this is one that really does have legs in the summer. And obviously Aaron Wan-Bissaka is a former Palace player. Is he Manchester United's first choice right back at this moment in time? Probably Dalot has moved ahead of him in that respect. And I think if there is a deal to be done where Wan-Bissaka returns to Selhurst Park and then get Elise going in the opposite direction, that might be a deal that suits all parties.
Yeah, exactly that, and it's certainly going to be a very interesting time for Manchester United, and we'll try and wrap this up as quick as we can because I know how busy you are, Crookie. But in terms of INEOS, in terms of a wider scale, not just the transfers and stuff like that, in terms of appointments or even general changes to the football club, what can you tell us in terms of what their real sort of priorities are when they eventually do come in and start to throw their weight around, if you like?
Well, I think the priority first and foremost is to get the culture of the club right again. That word has been bandied around a lot in recent seasons, but the culture has been wrong. I think Erik ten Hag has been trying to change that. You may say that perhaps he's been clumsy in the way that he's done that at times, but I think most United fans realise that there needs to be a bit more discipline at the football club. The phrase I used a lot when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was in charge. Club legend, of course, what he did on the pitch, but it was like the kids were running the classroom at times when he was manager, and Ten Hag has tried to change that and tried to shift the power back towards the manager's office as it was in the glory days under Sir Alex Ferguson. So I think the new sporting director, new head of recruitment are going to be key to doing that. And they've got to start getting their recruitment right, because you can use a lot of different sticks to beat the Glazers with. They have spent money in the transfer market. Yes, it's not been their own money, but they've certainly invested, and they've invested poorly. And until United start to get that right, it's very difficult for them to close the gap on the likes of City and Liverpool and even Arsenal, who've moved ahead of them. But actually, what Tottenham showed last summer is that it only takes 2 or 3 intelligent signings to move the club in the right direction. All those players that Tottenham signed last summer, Maddison, Van der Ven in particular, they could and should have both been on Manchester United's radar. They weren't big money transfers. In the case of Maddison, it was a player who was proven in the Premier League. And I think United need to be a lot more intelligent with the way they go about their recruitment moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And intelligent and Man United's recruitment don't normally go in the same sentence, Crookie, but I'm going to trust you on this one, and fingers crossed it could be something that surprises us all. And I mentioned to you before when we were going through a couple of things that I wanted to talk about before we hit record on this podcast. I don't think it would be fair to talk about Man United and business without mentioning a certain Frenkie de Jong. Now, of course, there's been a few links in Spain, a few reports coming from that part of the world, once again linking Frenkie de Jong with Manchester United. Of course, the reports are suggesting that he has said that he's open to a move now, which is quite significant because that was the only thing really in terms of him not moving on from wherever that may be, from Barcelona. But is Frenkie de Jong still a target for Manchester United? Does Erik ten Hag really have any credit in the bank in terms of saying, trust me, I know what I'm doing? And what can we expect from this potential saga yet again in the summer?
Well, saga is the operative word, because we've been here for more than one transfer window, and De Jong has just played games really with Manchester United, and they've wasted their time in trying to sign a player that never really had any great interest in leaving Barcelona. But I think it's a really interesting question that you raise, because what we know about United's recent recruitment, you look at the likes of Onana and Anthony and Martinez and even Mason Mount, who was a player that Ten Hag has admired since his loan spell in the Eredivisie. The manager has had a lot more say on transfers at Manchester United than maybe you get at other big clubs. And Mauricio Pochettino, for example, I know is very frustrated that he's had almost no say in Chelsea's recruitment and feels that's been a big issue with their season. I don't expect Ten Hag to be given anywhere near as much say once the new board are put in place, once the sporting director and the head of recruitment are in situ. And therefore, I'm not convinced that we'll see Frenkie de Jong at Old Trafford anytime soon.
I think, as we've just said, it's probably maybe a good thing that the big prize fund should be slightly taken away from Erik ten Hag so he can focus on the pitch kind of stuff. But yeah, it's one of them things, isn't it? You try to find the happy medium. You don't really want to give the keys to the so-called war chest directly to the manager, but then on the same note, you want them to have a bit of a say in terms of who's coming in. And just one very final question, Crookie, in terms of a general outlook on Manchester United, as I've said at the top of the podcast, you're a Manchester United fan first and foremost, of course. How are your feelings towards Manchester United at the moment? It's been a very turbulent season to say the least, but of recent times, I tweeted out after the game at the weekend, I am starting to see a bit of a difference in terms of being a little bit more assured on the pitch. There is that confidence, especially going into the latter stages, which of course is the Manchester United DNA. But from your side of things and your perspective, how are you feeling about Manchester United right now?
Well, listen, you never fall out of love with your football club. The football club, in many ways, helps define your personality. So, through good times and bad, they're always going to be there. But you can fall out of love with players. And I've certainly fallen out of love with a lot of these Manchester United players, a lot of players who've come and gone over the years. And that's not because they're not delivering silverware, as we've been accustomed to growing up, because no team has a divine right to win trophies. It's been that lack of effort that I think we've seen for a lot of this season. You can excuse a player for missing a chance or making a defensive mistake, but you can't excuse players who don't put a shift in for the shirt, who don't put a shift in for their teammates and for the manager and for themselves, first and foremost. If I hate the phrase not playing for the manager, because if you're not playing for the manager, then therefore you're not playing for yourself and you're not playing for the supporters. And I think what we've seen in recent weeks is a better determination, a better team spirit, and therefore more endeavour and effort on the pitch than we've seen for much of the season. So as long as that continues, I think it can be a positive end to the campaign. And I think Old Trafford can be a more positive place to be. And I think that the presence of Sir Jim Ratcliffe in the director's box, obviously we haven't seen the Glazers, thankfully, for some time, but the fact he wanted to be front and centre, he's posing for selfies, I think he signed a couple of autographs as well. I think that's what you want. You want someone making big decisions at your football club that is willing to be front and centre and is willing to really become part of the fabric of the football club. And I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe will bring that.
Well, hopefully, anyway. But as I've said to you before many a time, Crook, it's the hope that kills you, isn't it? But I just wanted to say a massive thank you, not only for joining me today and making your debut on the mufcMPB channel, but also from a personal perspective. You've helped me so much already in my short time in this industry, and I just want to say a massive thank you for everything you've done for myself personally, and also for being such a hard worker. It's very often I see how hard you work and how many things you've got to juggle. It's not just the reporting; it's also the live reporting. It's also coming in and doing shows of your own as well. It's a massive inspiration to see. So not just from my personal perspective, but from everyone in the world of football, from everyone from talkSPORT. I just want to say a massive thank you and keep up the great work and of course stay inspiring, my friend.
You're making me blush, but yeah, keep up the good work yourself.
Thanks always. And it doesn't take a lot for Crookie to lose his emotion there. It's just put a Man United game on, but I'm happy for him to at least have those rosy cheeks smiling again. But thank you so much, Crookie, and of course, thank you to everyone who has watched today's podcast on the mufcMPB channel. Please be sure to like, subscribe. You know all of that kind of stuff now, and also drop Crookie a follow on Twitter. He is right across, as we know, pretty much everything, not just Man United stuff, everything there is to know. Crookie will be putting it out on his Twitter, as will mufcMPB. So as I say, like, subscribe, do all of that stuff, and be sure to join me next week with who knows who I will be joined by. Thanks again, and glory, glory, Man United and all of that stuff.